Thank you all so much for joining us today at Catalyst. In particular, thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Megan LaFlamme. I am a director of product marketing here at Cohesity, and I'm joined by Tony Drasick, CIO from Shumaker, a premier legal and legislative service firm, one of the top 200 in the country. So today we're going to be talking a bit about the current economic conditions that we're in right now and cost playing such a huge role in decision making across organizations, from where to invest, where to optimize spend. And in this session, we're going to talk a bit about a CIO's perspective and how they're thinking about infrastructure and data infrastructure costs, as well as how to balance for growth during economic headwinds. But with that, I'm going to welcome Tony Drasick from Shumaker to Catalyst. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us today.
Megan, good afternoon. It's great to be here, and I look forward to chatting.
Awesome. Before we kick things off, can you please just introduce yourself and maybe share a short background on Shumaker and your team's charter?
Yes. As you stated earlier, I'm the Chief Information Officer here at the firm at Shoemaker Loop and Kendrick. I've been with the firm since October of 2021. We approximately have about 300 lawyers and advisors, over 550 employees. We're located in throughout Ohio, the Carolinas, down in Florida. Um, the team is comprised of your basic, let's say the structure of the IT team. We have help desk, network, security, infrastructure, applications, e-discovery, and the goal of the team is at the end of the day to provide the best possible service for our attorneys. 24/7. Give them a chance where they could work anywhere, remove any barriers, so they're productive from anywhere, any device, any location.
That's awesome. And you mentioned being this service in service to the legal firm. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of your internal SLAs for, a business that's running 24/7 and a work from anywhere culture? What kind of specific business SLAs is your team working towards?
Yeah, so with the law firm, our attorneys, they're working 24/7. It's all driven by client demand. Clients, in this day and age, the expectations are very high. So our folks, they're working around the clock. The SLA, we always joke and always, during the interview process, interviewing folks saying, hey, the SLA at a law firm is literally 15 seconds. So it's almost like, on demand, no matter what time it is. So that's why we make sure to properly staff, the team so we could deliver that. But in addition, making sure we have the proper technologies so there is no downtime. So if that's leveraging, on-prem, cloud, whatever that is, making sure if it's, N+1, the proper redundancies are built in, failover, all that good stuff. Obviously, security later on top of that, but making sure that we have the best possible solutions, best possible technology in place, and making sure that they're robust and scalable.
That's super helpful. And I know we'll dive in a little deeper into some of these topics shortly. So thanks for that overview. So many organizations right now are thinking about the longer term strategy to withstand current economic headwinds. So that means not only controlling spend, but also investing strategically for longer term growth, particularly with regard to digital technologies. So, for example, in 2022 survey, nearly 70% of CFOs said that they plan to increase spend in digital technologies through the recession. And this is after a really significant growth on technology budgets during the COVID-19 pandemic. But this is also, not just looking at cost optimization, cloud spend is top of mind for many. A recent survey from Cohesity noted that the vast majority of organizations believe they're watching money, they're overspending in the cloud in particular. But cloud spend is one part of many of these IT analyses. There's also initiatives to look at where automation technologies and initiatives can be leveraged more broadly, across teams and business units, as well as adopting platforms where appropriate that streamline business processes across these departments to derive more value from these investments overall. And then I think another important point is that when evaluating costs, it's important to factor into the cost optimization with considerations around business and technical risk, and that traditional cost cutting might not always be sufficient to sustain that long-term growth. So Tony, I'd like to hear a bit about the landscape of your business and the technology stack in particular, talking a little bit about how you're thinking of addressing the current economic climate. And to start, maybe you could give us just a high level overview of, the footprint of your technology stack, whether, you mentioned on-prem, in the cloud, what's virtualized. Maybe give us a lay of the land of sort of what you're working with today, and then we can talk about where you're potentially making some investments in the future.
No, absolutely. And the first couple of things that really stuck out when listening to you to talk was optimizing and maximizing. It's not about just cost reduction. It's about really, to me, it's always about optimizing what we currently have and leveraging all types of technology to make us better. Our current landscape is a hybrid environment between on-prem and our whole cloud journey. We want to be very methodical with our cloud journey. Make sure that walk before we run, make minimizing any type of end user impact to our attorneys and our workforce. We are all virtualized, very heavy Microsoft shop, doing a lot of the key, using a lot of the core technologies that law firms use, for document management. Our iManage system, our accounting, our 3E for time entry, iTimekeep, and so on. So it's really looking at those technologies and how could we maximize those. A couple of the things that we did recently was we migrated our phone system to the cloud. I'm really getting out of the let's say on-prem phone business. Gives our guys a chance to focus their abilities and skills on other technologies, how to make us better, as opposed to worrying about patching servers, worrying about hardware. Another thing that a couple other things that we're in the process of doing is migrating our document management system to the cloud, to the iManage cloud. Another thing is obviously the whole M365 journey, email, Office, all that good stuff. Then finally, on the legal end, it's two of the processes we're focused on now. It's taking our intake process and our expense process and disbursements, and using a technology called EMF to quote unquote electrify those. So it's about making our staff better, making our staff more productive. And the good news is a lot of these things that we're doing, it's saying kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, is we're taking our on-prem spend and obviously shifting those dollars to the cloud. So necessarily our budgets aren't going up. We're just moving the dollars around and trying to maximize what we have. Same thing with the Microsoft stuff, really looking at our licensing and utilizing if it's an E3 or an E5, and making sure that we're maximizing everything that we could get. Same thing with our contracts, just making sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can before we're looking at other solutions.
Those are great examples. And I think you're touching on a lot of the topics that I wanted to discuss today, which is not simply looking at cost cutting, but investing in areas that, for example, will help your legal firm,
Yep.
count more billable hours as opposed to being, caught up in administrative and manual processes that aren't adding value.
Yep.
And I think you started to touch on this, Tony, but maybe you could just tell the audience a bit about, in the current economic climate and some of the headwinds that Shoemaker is thinking about, how does that impact budget planning, and what does the next, 12 to 24 months look like from a budget perspective, and how are you addressing that?
And a few things, obviously, a couple things that stuck out is, let's say the billable hour. We want to make sure that technology isn't hindering our attorneys from billing. They should be focusing on billing and not spending 10 hours to enter 2 hours of time. So that's obviously always trying to make things as easy as possible for the attorney. In terms of budgets, we're always, let's say, cautiously optimistic. We do believe that you need to, invest in technology because it's easy to fall behind. Once you fall behind, it's going to cost, let's say 10x to catch up. So we're always very cautious if we start to we're not talking about cutting budgets, but just want to keep an eye on them. you know so just because we know that the focus is that technology could really, if your technology is not right, it could really harm the business. And obviously with all that, we wrap around security, and same thing there. We want to make sure that we continue to invest in security and expand our stack.
I really like your emphasis on technology and security should not be a hindrance to business, which is quite a balance. But I think your points lead us really well into some of the topics that we wanted to discuss today around, particularly this Gartner report around the 4 R's for cost optimization. And in this recent report, Gartner talks about how IT and operation leaders can focus on not just cost cutting or mere cost reductions, but relative business value. And so I think this aligns really well with exactly the points you were making. For example, how investment in digital initiatives will contribute to additional reductions over time.
Yep.
And as I mentioned before, Gartner knows that it's important for leaders to think beyond that traditional cost cutting and identifying opportunities, sometimes beyond the CIO's budget, to optimize for growth, like improving end user productivity, which you mentioned, Tony, and streamlining business processes. And consideration of these factors on top of costs like technical risk, like business risk and security, as well as the time it takes to realize value when evaluating investment needs, you need to prioritize all of these key considerations when thinking about potential reduction. So, with those things in mind, Gartner presents the 4 R's for cost optimization strategy to take this multi pronged approach that considers not only the desired financial outcome, but also additional value generators that may be difficult to quantify upfront, but ensure that a company is set up for strategic growth post recession. So the 4 R's include, reduce and replace, rethink, and reinvest, and ultimately aim to categorize some of the many different levers that can be exercised for cost optimization. So in reduce and replace, you see some traditional, cost cutting options, reduction, um, rethinking through where budget is allocated. This is where the evaluation of business and technical risk comes in. So, I'll call out that the loss of personnel. Many studies have shown that layoffs don't necessarily or generally correlate directly to improved profits. And so Gartner has developed a model to help evaluate some of these levers and consider other important variables like time to completion. We've talked about risk, as well as growing emphasis and ability to maintain focus on other key strategic areas like DEI initiatives.
Yep.
So with rethink and reinvest, which I think aligns a lot to what you've sort of opened the discussion with Tony around looking to optimize where you're currently spending, for business process improvements and thinking about shifting investment into like automation, removing barriers to generating value. Are there any areas that you foresee increasing spend in over the next 1 to 3 years, for example?
The one area which I think it's always going to increase is on the security front. I think that that's always the easy answer. Um, the other thing is obviously leveraging a lot of these, let's say, cloud technologies, and building out those models. Some things, as I hear, with the reduce, replace, rethink, revest, I do agree. My thing is always about, like I mentioned earlier, you know, replacing things. For example, I'm not a fan of I don't think the reduce works, but the one thing, let's say, with our intake process, right now it's very paper heavy. So we're looking to streamline that, through the use of, technology through this product, and where it's all going to be quote unquote electrified. Now instead of, our intake team worrying about, the paperwork and filling it out and routing and getting approvals, they'll be able to open files faster, which means we can start billing faster. So it's about using, kind of, rethinking and reinvesting in those types of technologies and replacing those manual processes. I think we're like a lot of other AmLaw 200 firms where we're just extremely busy. From the attorney to the paralegal, the legal assistant, the admin staff, the IT staff, the marketing staff. Everybody is extremely busy, and let's say we all need more people. So it's a way about doing things smarter and more efficient. Uh, because the list doesn't get any shorter; it just gets longer. So we're
It's
just giving
longer.
people more time to let's say do their day job.
Absolutely. And I think one of the difficult decisions in your position, I imagine, is determining prioritization and the relative importance of all the different products lines and services, and analyzing trade-offs from a business perspective, as your team is really the foundation to support a lot of those initiatives across the company. Can you talk a little bit about other stakeholders, how you work with key business stakeholders
Yes.
across the company to help guide future funding decisions that are driven by or supported by your team, but are ultimately to push the business and their and other departments goals along as well?
No, absolutely. Once again, a couple things that I can't stress enough. It's the teamwork and the collaboration, not only within the IT team, but through the leadership team and firm wide. Our senior leadership team is very aligned. We meet, communicate on a weekly basis. Some of us on a daily basis, and making sure that all our goals align. Let's say at the end of the year, we all fill out kind of, let's say our project spreadsheets, and we sit as a leadership team and say, okay, what are our top priorities? Obviously, there's some things with IT that are blocking and tackling. Let's say like the phone system, email. Then obviously there's these business projects that I mentioned, like I manage cloud. Then also there's other things as I mentioned with intake and expense, and how's that going to make the business better. So not only do we try to like, hey, we're going to do these projects, but how do they align to the business need, and how are we getting better? As opposed to like, oh, we're going to go to the cloud just to go to the cloud. We're not doing that. We're trying to figure out what problem are we trying to solve. I know I
Yeah.
keep using the same examples, but one of the issues is, hey, you know what? We need to open files faster, and obviously that what I mentioned earlier with some of those processes that we need to, let's say, electrify. So that's what we're looking at. It's like, what problem do we need to solve, and we talk about it, at a senior leadership level. Then obviously same thing with our management committee, get approvals and all that, but it's all about, the teamwork, the collaboration, having the proper stakeholders. Or if it's an IT project, I'll be the sponsor. If it's a, finance project, our CFO will drive that, and so on. You know,
Nice. And touched on this earlier, but when we think about creative ways to look at cost optimization, you talked about evaluating acceleration to cloud where appropriate, or where it solves a specific business problem. Uh, you also touched on reevaluating licensing, and I think that's really interesting. As we think about ways that we can take a look at what do we have already that we're spending, but we could potentially derive more value from. Do
yep.
you have any examples of areas that you're exploring that relate to that sort of process of getting more out of what you have today?
I think the Microsoft example is always the easiest example. Let's say even with the E5, just because there's so much more in the E5. Obviously, there's an uplift in cost, but making sure that we are maximizing, um, everything that's included in that, especially on the security side. Same thing. Let's say even with Cohesity, kind of going from the traditional Cohesity model, looking at more of the let's say Cohesity as a service, more of the cloud initiatives, and saying, hey, what can we leverage more from um, our current infrastructure, and really evolving with all our technologies, and
Mhm.
taking it to the next level.
That's great. Tony, you gave me a seamless segue, and I've got to jump on it. I had another question for you that I'll use in the next section, but I wanted to talk a little bit about, backup and recovery and the important role that it plays, particularly when, during economic headwinds, during recessions, we do see an increase in cyber attacks, for example.
Yep.
And thinking about sort of the next evolution for data security and management for the cloud era, we introduced the Cohesity Data Cloud Platform, which is that unified platform for data security and management for the cloud era. So we protect customers' most critical data workloads and provide that simple way to secure and manage data across data centers, edge, and the cloud. And the platform brings together these five key pillars: data protection, data security, data mobility, data access, and finally insights. And we've built a quite an incredible amount of depth across these pillars, including for data protection, backup, instant mass recovery, both of these things to improve RPOs and RTO, as well as cyber vaulting and threat scanning into our growing data security platform. And we've also really invested very heavily in the cloud. So many of our recent and our many of our recent launches have focused around software as a service, as more organizations are looking to mature their offering but minimize the amount of workloads that they're managing in house. So, powering this platform at the bottom, you'll see some of our key tenants around scale and simplicity, as well as zero trust security. So, could you just tell the audience a little bit about, how you leverage Cohesity today for data management and security?
You make it sound so easy, like with all those pillars. But all kidding aside, I couldn't agree more. Let's say at the 50,000 foot view, the one thing that I could tell you in my little over a year and a half with the firm, cohesity is not one of the things that keeps me up at night. It does work. It works great. Our entire solution works great. It's scalable, it's robust, it's secure. A couple other things you touched on, let's say the whole as a service. I couldn't agree more. I just think in this climate, sometimes it's hard to find um, talent and hire folks. We have a great team. Unfortunately, people will leave. I think that's just the way, kind of. I think the way the world is today, with but so that's why it's. I want to make sure the firm's always protected. And to me, let's say the cohesity solution, it doesn't run itself, but it's. I know that from our past solutions, the team was spending a ton of hours just managing backups every day, you know testing and making sure that things worked, and it was just things were broken, and a backup chain would get broken, they have to receive the job, and it was just a constant struggle.
Yeah.
So I could tell you that one of the refreshing things is kind of you know inheriting this solution, and it's been great. There've been also, I couldn't agree more with the whole ransomware, and it just never ends. It's just always, there's always a constant threat. Same thing. I know it's not ransomware. Is weather. We have offices down in Florida. Back in September, during Hurricane Ian, we had to shut a couple of our offices down in Tampa, Sarasota, even all the way up to Charleston and Charlotte, where the building was cutting power. So we literally shut everything down, because obviously the buildings were losing power and all that. And one of the key pillars of why we were able to have zero loss of let's say business is the cohesity solution, where we were able to spin things up in our data center with literally just the flip of a switch. It was incredible. It almost worked too good. Like it worked. We're like, what do we miss? But it worked as advertised. And I
That's
don't want to minimize that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes everybody's looking for, like, oh my god, like fly it to the moon. It's like, hey, I just want the solution to work, and the solution works. And it's great that, like I said, we'd always test, but when I needed it the most, it came through. Because I know that, let's say some of the other CIOs and IT leaders on here, I'm sure that you're thinking the same thing I was. It was very stressful. Like, okay, this better work, and it did. So
That's fantastic to hear. really excited to also share that with the team more broadly, as well as others, our other customers on the line. I think, you know, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I think an important part to being able to support a sustaining business in a disaster, whether it's weather or a cyber attack, is that scalability and ensuring that you can very readily back up all of your enterprise data quickly in a timely fashion, but also recover it instantly. And scalability is really, when we look at our data protection solution compared to, maybe legacy or homegrown backup and recovery solutions, this is an example of where, companies can reinvest to optimize spend. So for more modern solutions like Data Protect with Cohesity, you see a huge savings in the manual overhead required to manage the solution,
Yep.
as well as the ability to scale those workflows and the simplicity of using it. You no longer need to manage several point solutions, constantly looking at jobs for how are these backups going, and managing these really complex, homegrown integrations that need that constant maintenance and monitoring, which you were mentioning. You combine that with the ability today with this modern technology to, with Cohesity, be able to consolidate and dedupe and compress that data significantly from across all the data silos. You save a significant amount of money on storage and other compute costs. So I'd love, just as a CIO, I'd love to hear your initial reactions to this topic of total cost of ownership and how you think about TCO as you're evaluating your technology stack and areas where you might want to reinvest or um, look at more modern solutions or moving to the cloud.
No, absolutely. One thing on the slide prior, the one thing that I would add, and that's kind of as you're talking, this kind of popped in my head. Everybody's talking about next gen firewalls, next gen endpoint protection. I think it should say next gen Cohesity data cloud. So maybe on the next one you put that in there. But
I'll
I
put it
do
in
look at,
notes and
let's say,
marketing. Yeah, and take it to
let's just
marketing.
say I know I do look at Cohesity as, let's say, kind of the next gen. You know, I think that when you say just backup, it doesn't even do it justice.
Yeah.
Some things in the um, total cost of ownership that we look at, which it's not just the cost of, let's say, the hardware and the software. To me, it is the labor, um, the ease of use. Like I said, flipping that switch and knowing it's going to work. There's no cost. What cost could you put on that? When you start talking about, recovery times and RPOs and all that stuff, what cost do you put on that? So to me, it's like you said, the overall cost of ownership. To
Yeah.
me, and the things that weigh the pendulum the most, it's always, the ease of use, and
Yeah.
it works. I think that sounds so basic, but to me, it's like I just want it to work.
It's
Like I don't
the
need it to
reliability.
do.
Yeah,
I,
the
I just need
reliability
it to
is
do A,
critical.
B, and C. I don't need it to do all these other things. I just need it to work, and it just works. So
Absolutely.
to me, the big, but also the big thing is, the management of it. I don't want to have to hire 10 engineers to manage any solution.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and I think, particularly in the event of any kind of outage or cyber attack or disaster, what you need more than anything is reliability. And,
yeah,
we've talked a little bit about considering business and technical risk when you're evaluating cost-cutting solutions. Our modern backup and recovery solution is really laser focused on that reliability from RTO and RPO, with the focus on getting organizations back up and running after a ransomware attack or other outage disaster as soon as possible. So the solution is really designed specifically for that. It's to back up, petabytes of enterprise data every very quickly, ensuring that backups are fast, and you ultimately being able to improve your recovery point objectives to ensure that there's little to no business impact. You gave that great example of Hurricane Ian and folks, second guessing, like, did I miss something? But I think that ability to instantly restore that data, some of our customers have reported, a 10x improvement in their recovery time objectives, compared to their previous legacy solutions. I think this is an example of balancing, optimizing costs and technical risk as with those other value drivers, like minimizing those business disruptions, letting you sleep at night, knowing that you don't have to worry about something, and ultimately supporting ongoing business functions is just critical to withstanding economic headwinds. So I think that modern backup and recovery in the context of that data security and management solution is, I think, all the more necessary in times like these. Um, so I think from there, I'd love to just share a story from um, Shumaker from a few years back. And I think this was in 2019 when the firm back then had only 6 locations and a variety of legacy infrastructure solutions that were becoming cost prohibitive and difficult to manage, especially when it came to data recovery. It was tedious, occasionally could take up to 2 days to recover a single VM. And so, leading up to this, the Shoemaker firm began to implement changes across IT infrastructure to enable more redundant and modern environment. And after a broad evaluation, I think of many modern and traditional and more legacy solutions, Shoemaker selected Cohesity, and you guys have been fantastic partners since. Um, I think some of the outcomes from a few years back were being able to consolidate legacy solutions into a single platform.
Yep.
Huge in being able to reduce the amount of manual overhead needed and allowing your team to work on more value oriented opportunities and move on to the next big project. The previous exchange backups that took up to 32 hours per server now only took 5 minutes, even with a much greater volume of data. And with Cohesity being able to back up, 15 petabytes of source data, but with more than 150x data reduction, huge savings in terms of the physical space. So I'd love to hear, Tony, sort of overall, you mentioned this earlier about it's not just backup and recovery, like from your CIO perspective on Cohesity, how does this fit into your broader data management strategy when you think about planning for disaster recovery or planning for data security? I just love to hear about sort of how you think about the critical role that this plays in your broader sort of tech infrastructure planning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I mentioned before, let's say I was pleasantly surprised that I inherited, let's say, the Cohesity solution. So let's say that was that was made my life a little bit easier as I transitioned, into the firm. A couple things, right away that stick out. Let's say since let's say this this was written is actually this week, yesterday, we opened up a new Akron, Ohio office. Brought on a group of attorneys, and the reason I bring that up is our law firm is very fast paced. We're growing, and the data never ends. Um, litigation, all the work we do, it's a ton of data. Um, Not only on production, but we need to make sure that data is backed up and secured. So the nice thing is, let's say fast forward 4 years, 4 years, and probably our footprint has let's say doubled in terms of data. We were able to grow the solution. The thing I like about Cohesity is the solution. We could grow with it. And let's say now, the one thing I haven't mentioned yet, is the couple of times where we had to call support's been great. So I think that's always, important to say. I don't like anybody saying, "Oh, you'll never need to call support." Listen, things are great. There's always, hey, this whatever. Our guys call them, it's resolved. They remote in, boom, it's done. Support is great. Our rep, um, he's great. He always keeps us, on top of things, talking about, let's say, kind of the whole next gen. What are we going to do? But the thing that makes me feel good, like I mentioned earlier, definitely doesn't keep me up. But I also know as we get, um, as the firm grows, if it's regardless if, we're moving workflows to the cloud, to on-prem, to here or there, I know that Cohesity has a solution to fit all that. So knowing that it's just scalable, robust, all that, to me, it's great. To
Yeah.
me, I don't think you should be swapping out, let's say your backup, your DR solution every 3 years. It should grow with you. And that's what I feel like we have a solution that's going to grow with the firm. And it could be anything that we throw at it. Like I said, we opened the new office this week. We're going to have a ton more data, and it's not going to be a problem.
That's
So.
awesome. Yeah, I think that extensibility is critical. And you touch exactly on, I think, where a lot of organizations are today is looking for solutions that are going to meet them where they are today, but also into the future, knowing that like their data estates are going to, double, triple, quadruple in the coming years, as well as the workloads themselves changing as you evaluate new solutions and new technologies and start thinking about what transitions from on-prem to the cloud. That extensibility and that scalability is such a critical need when you're evaluating solutions that are, central to your broader data management strategy.
Yeah,
So
and
it's great.
I feel like, everything I'm seeing from the Cohesity end, there's always something, maybe not always, but seems like you always have new products coming out, to protect our data even better. If it's from ransomware or the vault or whatever that is, site protect. I always feel like, you guys are, staying on top of it and exceeding that to make sure that you're ahead of the game and offering the products to, customers like myself, making sure that, it's not just become stale technology. We
Awesome.
do have that roadmap to grow with you. So,
That's great to hear. Awesome. Well, Tony, I just want to thank you for taking the time first to join us again, and as well as discussing data economics. I think it's can be a really difficult subject, as many organizations are facing the same challenge to think through where they're potentially going to optimize spend and where they can reinvest. And I really appreciate your perspective today because it gave an outlook that I think is so important, which is what does the business need? What business problems can I solve? And where can I sort of reinvest or rethink my spend as opposed to just cutting costs, that not only meet your financial targets today, but allow for growth into the future. So I have no doubt that listeners have taken some valuable perspectives from your experience. So I can't thank you enough for joining us.
oh, no problem. And, last thing I'll say, with the cohesity, it's, I always believe in continuous improvement. And I feel that with, let's say, the cohesity stack, you guys are continuously improving and getting better. And like I said, that helps me when I go in front of my management committee, let's say back, I know that you guys do all that too. So it makes my life a little bit easier on that front. So.
That's awesome to hear. I can't wait to share this with the team. And thank you to the audience as well. I hope that you enjoyed this session and look forward to seeing you throughout the rest of Catalyst. Thank you so much. Have
Megan,
a good
and once again, thank you for inviting me. It was great. I hope you know some folks find this insightful, and thank you guys very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Have a good day.
You too.